Welcome back to the Wild Robot Escapes, Chapters 12 through 17. Chapter 12, The Homesick Robot. We all feel sick at one time or another. Even the robot sometimes felt something like homesickness. Roz belonged with her son and her friends and on her island. She was determined to find her way back there, but how? If the robot was seen doing anything unusual, Mr. Sharif might have her destroyed. Roz had to be careful, so she calmly went about her farm work day in and day out, but all the while the homesick robot was secretly planning her escape. Chapter 13, The Electronic Signal. Beep, 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 beep. A message was flashing on Roz's computer. The drone was reporting a gusty wind that had sent it spiraling into the neighbor's bean field. So the robot grabbed the big and heavy toolbox and marched out to clean up the mess. Roz found the flying machine upside down, with its landing gear poking above the rows of leafy plants. It had some scrapes and scratches, but no major damage. She flipped it over, brushed it off, tightened a few screws, and then she said, "Return to Hilltop Farm." The engine started buzzing, and the machine lifted off the ground and flew home. As Roz marched back, she cut through a strip of forest that separated the two farms. There were trees and ferns and rocks and shrubs and small forest animals. It was a little piece of wilderness, and suddenly the robot was thinking that the wild island that she missed so much must be thinking of her too. Someday she would try to run away and return to her true home. Was this the moment for escape? Could it be as easy as sneaking off through the trees? No, it couldn't be that easy. Ahead, on the other side of the trees, Mr. Sharif was sitting in his pickup truck watching Roz. Because the robot's electronic signal, he knew that she had stepped off of the property, and he had raced to see what she was up to. Roz marched over to the truck, and Mr. Sharif leaned out of his window, and he said with this very serious expression on his face, "Don't ever leave the property without my permission. Do you understand?" "I understand," said Roz. She understood all right. She understood that she was always being watched. She understood that she was trapped on Hilltop Farm. Chapter 14, The Sad Truth. That night, while everyone was sleeping, Roz stayed up with her computer and researched sneaky objects. She looked for diagrams of her own body and for maps of the area, for any news that might help her escape. But the robot found nothing. The computer only let her access information about farming. She was cut off from the outside world. It was clear that if Roz wanted to escape from her new life, she would need help. But the cows didn't know how to escape, and Mr. Sharif would never let his robot leave. Who would possibly help Roz run away to a new farm? Chapter 15, The Children. As time rolled by, Roz saw less and less of Mr. Sharif, but he saw more and more of the children. They were shy at first, and the robot might look up from the pasture and see Jade peeking around the corner of the barn, or see Jaya spying from the branches of a tree. But the children were growing bolder, and then one day Roz marched into the workshop and heard giggling. She walked to the closet in the back, opened the door, and there was Jaya, smiling and trying not to laugh. "I'm hiding from my brother," whispered the girl. "Close the door." The robot closed the door. A minute later, Jade ran in, flushed and out of breath. "Hey, Roz, have you seen Jaya?" The robot just stared. "I know she's in here," said Jade, and he began prowling around the room. He searched under the work table, behind the tool chest, and between the bulky workshop machines. Finally, he marched up to Roz and he said, "I order you to show me where my sister is hiding." The robot pointed to the closet. Jade smiled mischievously and tiptoed over, and then he flung open the door and he screamed, "Found you!" "No fair," Jaya whined. "Roz showed you where I was hiding." The girl scowled at the robot. "That wasn't very nice, Roz. But you can make it up to me by playing hide and seek with us. Count to 100 and then try to find my brother and me, okay?" There was a brief pause, and then the robot said, "Okay." Jaya and Jade squealed with delight and scampered out of the door as Roz started counting. The robot's sensitive ears listened carefully to the children outside. She heard quick footsteps crunching across the driveway. She heard a giggle, the sounds of tree branches shaking. She heard a grunt and the sounds of hay bales being shoved aside. When the robot finished counting, it took her exactly 5 seconds to find Jaya up in the tree. It took her another 8 seconds to find Jade in the hayloft. "Wow, Roz, that was really good at seeking," said Jade as he picked the hay from his hair. Jaya snorted. "Yeah, well, let's see how good she is at hiding." Roz was even better at hiding. While the children counted, the robot silently slipped away, and an hour later they still hadn't found her. The siblings stood in the driveway, defeated. "We give up, Roz!" shouted Jade. "You win!" shouted Jaya. The junk pile beside the barn started moving, and Roz appeared. The robot had been sitting there all along, perfectly camouflaged among the scrap metal and the old farm machines. "The next time we play, you will have to let one of us win," said Jaya to Roz. The next time they played, Roz did. The robot enjoyed having the children around. They brought a little lightness into her world. She hoped to bring a little lightness into theirs. However, Roz had another reason for wanting the children around. She needed them. Her only chance of ever returning home was if Jaya and Jade could find it in their hearts to help her escape. But this was a delicate situation. If Roz tried too hard, the children might say something to their father. If they didn't try hard enough, she might be stuck on that farm forever. Chapter 16. The Robot's Dream. Cows grazed in the pasture. Wind rustled through the tall grass. Clouds drifted over the fields. Farm machines rumbled and buzzed. Milk flowed into bottles. Bottles were packed into boxes. Boxes were loaded into the milk truck. The truck drove away full and returned empty. Children romped around with their dog. A man sat at his desk. And a robot dreamed of escape. Chapter 17. The Birds. Hilltop Farm was home to many birds. Swallows were always swooping low over the grass and picking off insects. Crows cawed from the fields like a gang of hecklers. At night, owls glided over the countryside, silently searching for furry little meals. The robot was stuck on the farm, but the birds were free to go whenever they wanted, whenever they pleased. Lucky birds. One day, Roz was standing in the pasture admiring a hawk as he soared through the sky, when the cows began grazing around her. Their slow footsteps crunching in the grass, their teeth chewed, and their tails flicked at the flies. All the while, Roz stood there, staring up at the hawk. And then came Lily's soft voice. "What are you thinking about, Roz?" The robot turned to the calf. "I am thinking about Brightbill," she said. "It was not long ago that I was watching my son soar through the sky, and that seems like another lifetime." "You must hate your new life," said Annabelle. "I can't say that I blame you. Farming looks like grueling work." "Actually," said Roz, "I like farming. Somehow, it feels right to spend long hours working with machines and tools and crops and animals. But I miss my old life on the island." Tess had a mouthful of dandelions, but that didn't stop her from speaking. "Maybe you should start thinking of this farm as your new home. That island is awfully far away. There's a good chance you will never make it back there." "Don't say that," cried Lily. "Roz just has to make it home. She needs to be with Brightbill and all of her friends." "Tess is right," said Roz. "I may never make it back home. If I were a bird like my son, I could fly home all on my own, anytime I wanted. But I am only a robot." Well, nobody spoke after that. The cows went back to grazing, and Roz went back to admiring the hawk. Her eyes followed the bird as he soared through the sky, free to go wherever he pleased. Chapter 18. The Entertaining Robot. The children wandered out behind the farm buildings, through a clearing, over to an old oak tree. It was the same tree her father had climbed when he was a boy. Mr. Sherriff's initials were carved in the bark, at the bottom of the long list of initials. For generations, all the Sherriff had carved their initials into that tree, going back to the ancestors who first built the farm. Someday, the children would add their initials to the tree. Beneath the leafy branches was a scattering of acorns. Jade cleared a spot for himself, sat down, and pulled a small computer from his pocket while Jaya climbed above. The siblings spent the afternoon there, lazing around the tree, until the robot marched past, carrying a big, heavy toolbox. "What you doing, Roz?" said Jade. The robot stopped. "The drone has crash-landed again," she said. "I am going to fix it again. Do you need help?" "I do not need help." "I'm bored," said Jaya. Her legs were dangling above her brother's head. "Can we do something fun, please, Roz?" The robot put down her toolbox and said, "What would you like me to do?" "I don't know," said Jaya, thinking hard. "Can you do a backflip?" "Yes, I can do a backflip." A grin spread across the girl's face. "Roz, I order you to do a backflip." At that, Roz crouched down, and then she leaped into the air, flipped backward, gently landed on her feet. A perfect backflip. Jade put away his computer. Jaya jumped down from her branch, and the children were very impressed. "What else can you do?" said Jade. "Can you juggle?" "Yes, I can juggle." "I order you to juggle, some of these acorns." Roz walked up to the tree, picked up 3 large acorns from the ground, and began juggling them in perfect rhythm. Jaya studied the robot's movements and then began tossing acorns into the air as well. The first one went a little too high. The next one went a little too far. And soon they all came tumbling back into the grass. "Do you know any jokes?" said Jade. "Why did the chicken cross the road?" "Oh, never mind." Jade scratched his head. "Can you tell us a story?" "What kind of story would you like to hear?" "A robot story," said Jade. "An animal story," said Jaya. "How about a robot and an animal story?" said Roz. The children smiled at each other. They sat against the tree, looked up at their robotic storyteller. "Once upon a time, there was a robot who lived alone on an island," Roz began. "She spent her time wandering around the mountains and forests and meadows, and then something terrible happened. Rocks fell. The robot tumbled off the cliff. She survived the fall, but sadly, the rocks killed 2 geese, smashed 4 of their eggs. The robot stood there, staring at the poor goose family, until she heard a tiny voice peeping from somewhere nearby. She followed the peeping voice and discovered a perfect goose egg, sunk in the dirt. The robot carefully picked up the goose egg and carried it away. And when the gosling hatched from his shell, the first thing he saw was the robot looking back. 'Mama, Mama,' he peeped. The gosling thought that the robot was his mother, and from that day on, she was. The robot adopted the gosling as her son, and together they made a funny, happy little family. The end. The children sat there and thought about Roz's strange story, and then they looked up at her and said, "What happened next?"